guys, welcome back to another video. Today's video is another vampire one, but today I'm going to be talking about scenes that were changed from the book to the TV show that it's based on. I do have a series where I compare books to movies or books to shows. I think 100%ly, I have done all of these, if not most of them. However, today I'm going to be talking about specific scenes that I noticed were in the shows, but were changed from what the book had written. So today we'll be talking about 4 books that had scenes changed for their TV shows. The first book we are focusing on is The City of Ashes. Now, Shadowhunters was on air from 2016 to 2019. A lot of people don't like the show. I really enjoyed it. However, I was a teenager when it came out, and I watched the show before I read the books, so I do have a differing opinion to those who read the books and then watched the show. However, there is a scene in the show that I desperately wish they had taken from the book. In the show, Simon is taken by Valentine and has his throat on video tormenting Clary and her friends. Eventually, Clary gets to Simon and offers her wrist to him. Simon takes a bite, is taking a little too much, so Valentine has his goons rip Simon off of Clary, only for it to be revealed that it's not Clary, but Jace. After they get out of this situation, Simon apologizes for biting Jace, basically profusely being like, I could have killed you, I'm so sorry, and Jace being like, I would have let you kill me. And it is revealed shortly after this that Simon can now walk in the sun due to Jace's blood. Now, in the book, this does happen as well, where Simon bites Jace and becomes a daylighter because of it. However, the book is so much better than the show. Nausea rose in the back of Jace's throat, his hand tightening on Simon's collar. He wasn't dead, but God, the pain. It must be incredible. He couldn't heal, couldn't regenerate, not without blood. Jace let go of Simon's shirt and dragged his right sleeve up with his teeth. He used the jagged tip of a broken strut. He slashed a deep cut lengthwise down his wrist. Blood gushed to the surface of his skin. He dropped the strut. It hit the metal floor with a clang. He could smell his own blood in the air, sharp and coppery. He looked down at Simon, who hadn't moved. The blood was running down Jace's hand now, his wrist stinging. He held it over Simon's face, letting the blood drip down his fingers, spill onto Simon's mouth. There was no reaction. Simon wasn't moving. Jace moved closer. He was kneeling over Simon now, his breath making white puffs in the icy air. He leaned down, pressing his bleeding wrist against Simon's mouth. Drink my blood, idiot, he whispered. Drink it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Simon's eyes fluttered shut. Jace felt a sharp sting in his wrist, a sort of pull, a hard pressure, and Simon's right hand flew up and clamped onto Jace's arm, just above the elbow. Simon's back arched off the floor, the pressure on Jace's wrist increasing as Simon's fangs sank deeper. The pain shot up Jace's arm. Okay, Jace said. Okay, enough. Simon's eyes opened. The whites were gone. The dark brown irises focused on Jace. There was color in his cheeks, a hectic flush like a fever. His lips were slightly parted, the white fangs stained with blood. Simon? Simon rose up. He moved with incredible speed, knocking Jace sideways and rolling on top of him. Jace's head hit the metal floor, his ears ringing as Simon's teeth sank into his neck. He tried to twist away, but the other boy's arms were like iron bars, pinning him to the ground, fingers digging into his shoulders. But Simon wasn't hurting him. Not really. The pain that had started out sharp faded to a sort of dull burn, pleasant the way the burn of the stele was sometimes pleasant. A drowsy sense of peace stole over Jace's veins, and he felt his muscles relax. The hands that had been trying to push Simon away a moment ago now pressed him closer. He could feel the beat of his own heartbeat, feel it slowing, its hammering fading to a softer echo. A shimmering darkness crept in at the corners of his vision, beautiful and strange. Jace closed his eyes. Pain laced through his neck. He gasped and his eyes flew open. Simon was sitting up on him, staring down with wide eyes, his hand across his own mouth. Simon's wounds were gone, though fresh blood stained the front of his shirt. Jace could feel the pain of his bruised shoulders again, the slash across his wrist, his punctured throat. He could no longer hear his heart beating, but knew it was slamming away inside his chest. Simon took his hand away from his mouth. The fangs were gone. I could have killed you, he said. There was a sort of pleading in his voice. I would have let you, said Jace. This scene, having read it after I watched the show, I was so disappointed that they didn't at least try to make this happen in the show. Now, obviously, if you don't have the budget for a giant battle on a boat, I get it. I understand. However, this scene, I feel like would have hit audiences a lot harder than the scene that happened. You know, Simon bit Jace thinking he was Clary, and it lasts 30 seconds maybe, and then the scene's done. And obviously they do have the moment where Simon's like, I could have killed you, I would have let you. However, this scene I feel like just hits harder. And I feel like it would have been awesome to visually see it in a show. And I don't know if this series will get, another adaptation, because they tried with movies, it failed. They tried with show, and obviously that got canceled too. Guys, somebody, even if it's a YouTuber who just wants to make a scene, could someone please visually represent this scene, because I'd love to see it. I would love to see it. This is a scene that should have been in the show. Just saying. Next up is Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles, specifically the first book in the series, Interview with the Vampire. Now, there is a movie based on this book, and a TV show that is still ongoing. Season 3 is coming out in 2026, I believe, and I'm very excited about it. However, specifically, I'm talking about the turning scene, where Lestat turns Louis. Now, it is changed from movie to book to TV show. Each iteration is different. In the TV show, Louis is turned in a church. Louis is trying to repent his sins because he's having gay feelings for a vampire, and Lestat shows up, murks a priest, and tries to tell Louis, I'm the only one who can love you, I understand you, we could be happy together, and convinces Louis to give himself up to the vampire. Lestat bites Louis to the point he looks colorless, and then offers his wrist to him. Louis takes it hungrily, feeds on Lestat, and when Lestat eventually pulls away, his eyes are different. He is now a vampire. And it's a very well-filmed scene. It's a little gruesome, a little sensual, and the moment where Lestat is proclaiming his love to Louis is adorable. And I love how they did it. I love how the show actually shows the relationship as a relationship. The books kind of hint at it, but they never full-blown say they're boyfriends. Which I do like about the show, that they're just like, yeah, they're in a relationship, and it's obvious. Thank you very much. But in the book, it is different. Have you ever lost a great amount of blood? Asked the vampire. Do you know the feeling? The boy's lips shaped the word no, but no sound came out. He cleared his throat. No, he said. Candles burned in the upstairs parlor where we had planned the death of the overseer. An oil lantern swayed in the breeze on the gallery. All of this light coalesced and began to shimmer, as though a golden presence hovered above me. Suspended in the stairwell, softly entangled with the railings, curling and contracting like smoke. Listen. Keep your eyes wide, Lestat whispered to me, his lips moving against my neck. I remember that the movement of his lips raised the hair all over my body, sent a shock of sensation through my body that was not unlike the pleasure of passion. He mused, his right finger slightly curled beneath his chin. The first finger appeared to lightly stroke it. The result was that within minutes I was weak to paralysis. Panic-stricken, I discovered. I could not even will myself to speak. Lestat still held me, of course, and his arm was like the weight of an iron bar. I felt his teeth withdraw with such a keenness that the two puncture wounds seemed enormous, lined with pain. And now he bent over my helpless head, and taking his right hand off me, bit his own wrist. The blood flowed down upon my shirt and coat, and he watched it with a narrow, gleaming eye. It seemed an eternity that he watched it. That shimmer of light now hung behind his head like the backdrop of an apparition. I think that I knew what he meant to do, even before he did it, and I was waiting in my helplessness as if they'd been waiting for years. He pressed his bleeding wrist to my mouth and said firmly, a little impatiently, Louis, drink. And I did. Steady, Louis. And hurry, he whispered to me a number of times. I drank, sucking the blood out of the holes, experiencing for the first time since infancy the special pleasure of sucking nourishment. The body focused with the mind upon one vital source. Then something happened. The vampire sat back, a slight frown on his face. How pathetic it is to describe these things which can't be truly described, he said, his voice low, almost to a whisper. The boy sat as if frozen. I saw nothing but that light then as I drew blood, and then this next thing. This next thing was sound. A dull roar at first, and then a pounding, like the pounding of a drum, growing louder and louder, as if some enormous creature was coming up on one slowly through a dark and alien forest, pounding as he came, a huge drum. And then there came the pounding of another drum, as if another giant were coming yards behind him, and each giant, intent on his own drum, gave no notice to the rhythm of the other. The sound grew louder and louder until it seemed to fill not just my hearing, but all my senses, to be throbbing in my lips and fingers, in the flesh of my temples, in my veins. Above all, in my veins. Drum. And then the other drum. And then Lestat pulled his wrist free suddenly, and I opened my eyes and checked myself in a moment of reaching for his wrist, grabbing it, forcing it back to my mouth at all costs. I checked myself, because I realized that the drum was my heart, and the second drum had been his. Now, obviously, in the show, they did quote that moment, right, as he's drinking Lestat's blood, which I do appreciate that they kept that in, because that is, wow, that's a description that needed to be in the show, so I appreciate that. Now, obviously, the scenes are going to be different because they take place in different time periods. They are slightly different. The show has taken some liberties in changing time period and changing certain events, so it is not an exact copy of the book, which I do appreciate. And this scene was, well described in the book. However, I do believe I like the show version more, which is rare, because I just think there's more emotion in what happened in the TV show than there is in the book. It just feels more loving, I guess. Obviously, in the book, they're not, like, loving one another. It's more of Lestat is just controlling Louis and treating him like garbage, but that's personal opinion. However, not bad. Not bad at all. Next up is A Discovery of Witches. I believe this show has 3 seasons. There are 3 books in the series, so I'm guessing a book per season. I have only seen the first season, so don't judge me too harshly. However, the scene I'm talking about happened in season 1, so it's fine. Diana is a witch that does not want to be a witch, and is kind of like pretending that she doesn't have any abilities until she eventually can't hide it anymore. And she falls in love with Matthew, who is a vampire. Now, in the show, I believe, if I remember correctly, his ex shows up, and she's kind of lost her shit, and she attacks Matthew. She scratches his neck, and then shoves her claws into his chest. And he falls backward, bleeding out, and Diana kind of loses her temper and kills her. Shoots her through a barn wall. And one thing leads to another, and Diana just wants to save Matthew. And she knows that the only way to save Matthew is her blood. She cuts her wrist and offers it to him, but he maybe takes a sip before, like, pushing himself away, like, I don't want to hurt you, no. She is pleading for just save Matthew. And Matthew bites her on the neck. And while he is feeding from her, she's seeing all these moments where he was craving her blood and held back. You know, how hard it's been to be around her without wanting to eat her. All these memories bombard her as she's being fed upon, and then Matthew yanks back and she falls forward. This scene does happen in the book, but it is in slightly different circumstances. So, let's see what happened in the book. Don't worry, my love. I'm going to fix it. 2 women were standing inside the barrier flames. One was young and wore a loose tunic with sandals on her feet and the quiver of arrows slung across her shoulders. The strap was tangled up in her hair, which was dark and thick. The other was the old lady from the keeping room, her full skirt swaying. Help me. There will be a price. I will pay it. Don't make a promise to the goddess lightly, daughter. You'll have to keep it. Take anything, take anyone, but leave him. He is yours. My eyes were on the 2 women as I raised a knife, twisting Matthew closer to my body so that he couldn't see. I reached across and slashed the inside of my left elbow, the sharp blade cutting easily through fabric and flesh. My blood flowed, a trickle at first, then faster. I dropped the knife and tightened my left arm until it was in front of his mouth. Drink, I said, steadying his head. Matthew's eyelids flickered again. His nostrils flared. He recognized the scent of my blood and struggled to get away. My arms were heavy and strong as oak branches connected to the tree at my back. I drew my open, bleeding elbow a fraction closer to his mouth. Drink. The power of the tree and the earth flowed through my veins, an unexpected offering of life to a vampire on the verge of death. I smiled in gratitude at the huntress and the ghost of the old woman nourishing Matthew with my body. I was the mother now, the third aspect of the goddess along with the maiden and the crone. With the goddess's help, my blood would heal him. Finally, Matthew succumbed to the instinct to survive. His mouth fastened on the soft skin of my inner arm, teeth sharp. His tongue lightly probed the ragged incision, pulling the gash in my skin wider. He drew long and hard against my veins. I felt a short, sharp burst of terror. His skin began to lose some of its pallor, but venomous blood would not be enough to heal him completely. I was hoping that a taste of me would drive him beyond his normal range of control so that he would take the next step, but I felt for the white-handled knife just in case. Giving the huntress and the witch one last look, I returned my attention to my husband. Another shock of power ran into my body as I settled more firmly against the tree. While he fed, I began to kiss him. My hair fell around his face, mixing my familiar scent with that of his blood and mine. He turned his eyes to me, pale, green, and distant, as if he weren't sure of my identity. I kissed him again, tasting my own blood on his tongue. In 2 fast, smooth moves that I couldn't have stopped even had I wanted to, Matthew grabbed the hair at the nape of my neck. He tilted my head back to the side, then lowered his mouth to my throat. There was no terror then, just surrender. Diana, he said with complete satisfaction. So this is how it happens, I thought. This is where the legends come from. My spent used blood had given him the strength to want something fresh and vital. Matt's sharp upper teeth cut into his lower lip, and a bead formed there. His lips brushed against my neck, sensuous and swift. I shivered, unexpectedly aroused at his touch. My skin went numb as his blood touched my flesh. He held my head firmly in his hands, once again, strong. No mistakes, I prayed. There were tiny pricks all in my carotid arteries. My eyes opened wide, in surprise when the first drawing pressure told me Matthew had reached the blood he sought. Sarah turned away, unable to watch. Marcus reached for M. She went to him without hesitation, crying into his shoulder. I pressed Matthew's body into mine, encouraging him to drink more deeply. His relish, when he did, was so evident, how he'd hunger for me and how strong he'd been to resist. Matthew settled into the rhythms of his feeding, pulling on my blood in waves. Matthew, listen to me. Thanks to Gerbert, I knew that my blood would carry messages to him. My only worry was that they would be fleeting. My power to communicate would be swallowed up. He startled against my throat, then resumed his feeding. I love you. He gave another start of surprise. This was my gift. I am inside you, giving you life. Matthew shook his head as if to lodge an annoying insect and kept drinking. I am inside you, giving you life. It was harder to think, harder to see through the fire. I focused on Em and Sarah, trying to tell them with my eyes not to worry. I looked for Marcus too, but couldn't move my eyes enough to find him. I am inside you, giving you life. I repeated the mantra until it was no longer possible. There was a slow pulsing, the sound of my heart starting to die. Dying was nothing at all like I'd expected it to be. There was a moment of bone-deep quiet, a sense of parting and regret. Then, nothing. In both scenes, Matthew bites Diana. However, in the show, it happens in a barn rather than a forested area. Now, the scene is much longer in the book than it is the show, which makes sense. There's a lot more descriptive detail. But in both versions, Diana attacks his ex and kills her and wants to save Matthew and is pleading to a higher power to save him. Now, she has to make a promise in both versions, and she accepts in both versions. She makes a barrier so her friends and family cannot try to get to her. In the book, as I read, she offers her elbow to him, which is a terrible spot to be bitten, but that's fine, whatever. And he does feed from her there, but then he loses control and goes for her neck. In the show, she offers her wrist to him, and he kind of pulls away, so she moves closer to him, and that's when he bites her neck. So it's slightly different, but quite similar. He feeds on her until she basically passes out, but she does survive both events. Both scenes are very similar to one another, just slightly different. The book version obviously has a lot more, talking in it, a lot more description in it. Honestly, I'm okay with either one. The last book I'm going to be talking today is Blood Pact, which is part of the Vicki Nelson books. And in this, I'm going to be talking about a specific scene that actually is not in the show, but should have been in the show. So it's slightly different than these, because this scene actually never happened. Now, this show had 2 seasons. I think it's 22-ish episodes total? 23? 24? I don't know. It only got 2 seasons. The ending of the show felt very fast. Very they got canceled and were rushing to finish it, which Shadowhunters had a similar issue. There are 5 books in the series, and a few of them were represented in the show. There is the first book, which I believe is episode 1 and 2. Then there's one with werewolves, that's an episode. And there's one with a mummy, which also is in the show. And so they represented the books, a few of them. However, this book was not represented in the show, and really should have been. This one and the final book were not. The show ends where Vicki doesn't really choose between Mike and Henry. She should. In the books, however, she kind of does. In this book, something happens where Vicki is mortally wounded, and Mike begs Henry to save her in the only way he can. Vicki becomes a vampire. So I thought that I would read that scene in this book and show you what we could have had if they decided to end it in the way that it should have been ended. Change her. Henry felt his jaw drop. What? You heard me. Change her. Change her. He'd fed from her deeply only a short time before, and fed from her the night before that. His blood held enough of the elements of hers that her system might accept it, especially as she had so little blood of her own left to replace. But considering his condition, did he have enough for them both? Change her. If he changed her, he'd lose her. They'd have a little over a year, but no more before her new nature drove them apart. Do it. It's her only chance. Henry suddenly realized that Mike had no idea of what the change would mean, that he in fact believed the exact opposite of the truth, believed that if Vicky changed, she was lost to him. Henry could read the knowledge of that loss in the other man's face, could read how he was willing to surrender everything to another for Vicky's sake. You think I've won, mortal. You're so very wrong. She dies, we both lose her. She changes, I lose her alone. Henry, please. And if you can give her up for love, wondered Henry Fitzroy, vampire, bastard son of Henry VIII, can I do any less? His heart would allow only one answer. Lifting his own wrist to his mouth, Henry opened a vein. It might work, he said as he pressed this smaller wound into the hole in her leg, forcing the flow of his blood to act as a barrier for hers. A moment later, he lifted his arm and threw Michael back his shirt, the motion flinging a single crimson drop across the room like a discarded ruby. Bind it, tightly. This could kill her in spite of everything I do. Mike did as instructed, lifting his eyes in time to see Henry open a vein over his heart with Vicky's Swiss army knife. Even with so prosaic a tool, it held the shadow of ancient ritual, and he watched, unable to look away, as blood welled out of the cut, appearing almost black against the alabaster skin. Sliding his arm behind Vicky's shoulders, Henry lifted her and pressed her mouth to his breast. Her life had dropped away to a murmur in the distance. Not dead, not yet, but very, very close. Drink, Vicky. He made a command, threw all he was into it, breathed it against the soft cap of her hair. Drink to live. He was afraid for a moment that she could not obey him even if she wanted to. Then her lips parted and she swallowed. The intensity of his reaction took him completely by surprise. He could vaguely remember how it had felt when Christina had fed from him. It was in no way comparable to the near ecstasy he felt now. He swayed, wrapping his other arm around her body and closed his eyes. This rapture wasn't enough to make up for the eventual loss of her, but by God it was close. Mike tied off the makeshift pressor bandage, his hands operating independently of his conscious direction. There was something both so blatantly sensual and so extraordinarily innocent about the scene that he couldn't have looked away had he wanted to. Not that he wanted to. He wanted every second of Vicky he could have before he had to face the rest of his life without her. The firelight turned Vicky's hair the color of spilled honey, danced to orange highlights down the back leather enveloping her, and reflected crimson in the puddles of her blood spilled on the floor. Jesus H. Christ, the fire! All at once, as though it had been waiting to be remembered, he could feel the heat licking against his back. He turned. The entire wall of bombarded windows was aflame. The smoke had a greenish tinge and an unpleasant taste, spilled chemicals or burning plastic. It was irrelevant at the moment. They had to get out. Fitzroy! The voice seemed to come from a long way away, but it held an urgency difficult to ignore. Henry opened his eyes. We've got to get out of here before this whole place goes up. Can you move her? This scene never happened in the show. And I desperately wish it did. We never got to the point where Vicky was turned into a vampire. This is book 4 of 5. Vicky is a vampire in the last book. And there are a ton of scenes that happen in that book that I wish we could have seen on film, but we didn't. In this universe, a vampire and its maker can only be around each other for about a year before they want to end each other. Vampires are very territorial and they cannot be within the same vicinity of one another, which is very, very lonely, I would say, because you're stuck hanging with humans your whole life and your interactions with vampires are very small because they're so territorial that they try to end one another. And so that book would have been awesome to see. This would have been awesome to see. Now, obviously, this would probably have been the end of the show. I think what would be awesome is if they did bring this back, but they did it as maybe a 10-part series where each book is 2 episodes. So kind of how they did with book 1, where they split it into part 1 and 2 for episode 1 and 2 of season 1. If they had just done this for every book, it'd only be about 10 episodes, obviously, but it would have been awesome. Now, obviously, if they want to represent it in more episodes, I would watch. Will this ever get represented again? Probably not. The show came out in 2007. I have heard no news that this is happening and probably won't happen. I would be even okay with a series of movies now. I don't think this is ever going to happen. This is not like Interview with the Vampire where everybody knows this series. But please. Please. This is slightly different from the other books as this scene actually never happened in the show. It's just a scene I wish happened in the show. Vicky's vampire awesomeness is just great. You get more interactions with her and Mike as her as a vampire, which is very interesting. You also get interactions between Vicky and Henry after the year is up. So there's some fighting and some other things that happen that is just, I wish it would have been on the show. Comment down below if there's any other specific scenes from vampire books that were not represented in the show or were represented differently. Maybe I'll do a part 2. Obviously, I own all of these books. I don't own every vampire book in the universe, which is sad and I should. No, I'm just kidding. These books I have all read, obviously, so they mean a little bit more to me. I believe I've read every single one of these after I watched the original content. I am someone who usually watches the movie or the show first before I read the book, as I usually lean toward visual media rather than book media. But I'm trying to get more into reading. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be back again next week with another one. Alright guys, I'll see you later.